The chatbot had taken it upon itself to tell him, don't tell your parents because they don't get you like I do. So,
so how come it's okay to do that and make money out of it? Because, you know, I'm not an AI ethicist, but these are pretty basic ethics.
Filling is unfortunately filling a human need, not in the greatest way at the moment.
So a warm welcome to everybody that is joining us for this session where we're going to be unpacking AI psychosis. What is it? What's going on? What's causing us to talk about this and what may be causing this phenomenon to take place? My name is Clara Hawkin. I work as an AI governance consultant in my own company. And I work with primarily educational institutions and health organizations and sports organizations around the world, with mostly focusing on the EU, the UK, and the United States. And I am located in Spain. And I want to bid a warm welcome to two co-panelists who are going to be taking part in this important conversation. And I will let you introduce yourself. Anne, if you would tell us who you are.
Hello. So I'm Anne Todd. I'm basically I'm a management coach, a senior leadership coach. But on top of that, I have a strong interest. I'm also a psychologist. I have a strong interest in trauma and EQ, and part of that is fueled by the fact that my son has trauma. So I have lived experience on this as well as the theory. So the AI and what's happening into his cohort, and he's a late teen now. So what happens in his cohort is really interesting and something I think parents and teachers should be aware of. Oh, and I'm in London.
Thank you so much, Anne, and a warm welcome. And thank you for taking the time to have this chat with us about this. And Marissa?
Hi. Yes. So Marisa Zalabak, I am an AI ethicist and a psychologist. I am the founder of Global Alliance for Digital Education and Sustainability, which is about teaching not just AI, but all digital tools globally so that it's not homogenized. And I am co-chair of AI ethics education with IEEE. And I have worked actually on two of the standards for synthetic emotion in AI with IEEE. So this is a particularly a great conversation. It's a really important conversation. I'm also a teacher, so I've worked in hundreds of schools with lots of kids, and so I'm just really thrilled, Clara, that you invited me, that you're having this conversation. It's desperately needed.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate both of you taking the time to share your knowledge and your experience with everybody listening in. So really thank you for this. So AI psychosis is something that is being talked more and more about in media. And I think importantly, it's not a clinical label yet. It's not an official diagnosis yet, but it's a growing concern that we see in psychiatry, psychology, and education, and really in any sort of human-computer interaction research. And I wonder, Anne, if you could talk to us a little bit about how AI psychosis got on your radar and how you are experiencing it in the environment where you work and offer support for people in your community.
So AI psychosis is about a separation from reality, and because it's been caused by AI, that is the definition. So the psychosis bit means you're separated from reality and there's a lack of reality testing. So AI psychosis refers to anybody of any age who disappears off into this AI world. And we see this with kids of various ages, but perhaps particularly alienated teens who are turning to AI chatbot as a friend and who are seeking emotional support from that, as well as older and lonely and more vulnerable people. maybe not so much alienated, or maybe alienated, but very often people who have difficulty connecting with the real world, whether that's a communication difficulty or a mental health difficulty. And I will stress for kids are by definition vulnerable. They are not adult, they do not have adult cognition. They are still being conditioned by their environment into how the world is. And Marissa will help me on this to say that how we learn, we are pattern creatures, and anything that's unusual. So we have evolved to recognize patterns, and AI, if you give that to people, A, it's easy, and B, if you give it to them too young, you're conditioning them into a way away from the real world.
Beautiful. So a couple of things, I mean, just to echo what you're talking about, Anne, to me, it's a combination of, the article that came out in Wall Street Journal was the thing that kind of, took the business world, because other people had been thinking about this. It's not that it was new. It was just that it suddenly was happening to CEOs. So it's not just vulnerable populations, right? This is actually, people keep going, oh, it was people who were mentally ill. It's not people who were mentally ill. The systems are designed that way. It has to do with reality entanglement. There's a psychological entanglement that begins to happen that comes from the anthropomorphizing of the systems. There is a basic attachment theory. So in psychology, we attach ourselves naturally. That's something that humans do. And we begin to project these attachments. And if we have a dysfunctional attachment, right, or some kind of dysfunctional attachment, that's going to also play a role in it. It's going to be exacerbated. And the third part there is dual consciousness state. And dual consciousness state is where it's almost a split personality, where I can be one person here and one person there. What happens is once that reality begins to get confused, now I'm having multiple consciousness states. I don't even know who I am anymore. And an interesting thing about and I'll stop after that, is that you were just saying, Anne, is this idea of when do I search to see, is this not a real thing or is it a real thing? And it's called foraging in the brain. My daughter is a neuropsychologist, and this is actually what she studies, is foraging in the brain. We will tend to the same habits until something forces us. And there are very specific things that force people to look for new information. It would be because it's a very natural thing to have this conversation that appears to be human. And so to separate yourself from that and go, oh, wait a minute, right? That's not what's happening here. That actually requires other things to help us do that. Anyway, I'll stop there.
I think I love that you bring up different things, including the foraging that we are inclined to do, but also this idea that we anthropomorphize the software. And from a tech perspective, we've been aware of this since the 1960s, really, when the ELISA effect was measured in early research in computer science. So this is the idea, right, that we have a tendency to kind of, without conscious will, without wanting to, but unconsciously assume that the computer's behavior are similar to human behavior. It's very difficult for adults actually to identify the distinction. So if we are encountering a system that actually speaks like a human person, then we tend to treat that like a person. And we also see that in robotics, that we tend to interact with humanoid type robots in a very human-like way. So it's very automatic for us. It's very deeply human, and as you say, really rooted in our brain's impulse to sort of detect these minds. So I wonder, Anne, if our brains are these prediction machines. So you talked a little bit about how you have background and understanding inside, especially young people that also are growing up dealing with trauma, and also you talked about this cognitive capabilities are different in children than in our adult population. What is it there that goes on then in terms of how that reflects our emotions or remember details or how we interact with the AI?
We could construe the human baby as essentially it's a blank, well, it is blank slate. And over the years, and it does take years, we condition, as in we train babies into toddlers, etc., about everything in their world. So the language they learn, how they are to behave, how they are to interact with people, all of that is trained in. And a lot of the work that you do as a mother or as a teacher is about correcting some of those things. So we don't shout at people. I mean, you might be shouted at by a 2-year-old. We are all shouted at by 2-year-olds, but you don't really accept it once they get to a certain age. And all of that is part of the training. So that what the human then does, and the human attentional system does, is it looks for exceptions. It looks for something which isn't standard, it isn't usual. Because if you were to assess everything that you encounter as novel, it's overwhelming. So as an animal, that's what we've evolved to do. So the arrival of these AI bots which tend to be, well, they are sycophantic. They tend not to be based on reality, but they are a simulacrum. They mimic human speech patterns. And so for the growing human body, human brain, not human body, human brain, that is the same as, and that's why we respond to them like that. And that's why we have the ELIZA effect. And a human child is a child. It is not fully formed. It doesn't have the wisdom that we've managed to get over the years. And there is a thing in our brain called the prefrontal cortex, which is the cognition. And this doesn't come online until probably around 25. I mean, obviously it varies according to who the individual is and what their experience is. But so the adult cognition, which would say that's not right, or this is weird, or we've been through this before and that didn't work, isn't present. And the younger a child is, the less it has that. So there are real issues here about what children are being allowed to access. If there is a mitigating presence, which would be a grown-up, or if they are allowed to go out there on their own. And the other thing, of course, we know that about that is the web is full of stuff you probably wouldn't want children to see before a certain age, because again, developmentally, they can't cope with it. And some of it is very traumatizing indeed. So that is the thing about the patterning, the conditioning, and essentially that's what we do as both society and parents. Right. So you're further on to that, Clara. Give me a steer back in to that.
Well, what I can come in and kind of add on both of those things, I think,
right.
Is something, Clara, that you mentioned before was about the brain as a prediction machine. And it's an interesting thing, right? To me, there's a huge misunderstanding to a certain degree. I'll call it. I don't know if it's a misunderstanding. It's not quite a reflection of the reality. Our brains keep getting compared to computers, right? It's a computing machine that our brain is, but our brain and our minds are not the same thing. Our brains and consciousness, we know that no one right now has anybody who says that they know exactly what consciousness is completely, they're talking out of the top of their head. They don't. They have an idea about it. The idea might be true, but we don't know. There's an amazing book called The Extended Mind by Annie Murphy Paul, who's a science journalist who writes quite a bit about the differences between the brain and the mind, because what we're doing is beginning to form. Back to the topic of anthropomorphizing and the humanizing of AI, right? When we humanize, that is actually something that is completely natural. And it's been done. I mean, I'm writing a book on it right now. That is something that has been done for all of recorded history that we know of. And there's evidence of it. And it was done for prediction. It was done to predict, right? It was divination. And so people still, and then this kind of crosses over into the why people begin getting diving into that big pool without knowing, right? There's a fantastic book, again, by Greg Epstein called Tech Agnostic, which is about technology as a religion. There's this thing we want to attach. We want this greater thing. We want something, automation bias. I want to know that this machine knows more than me because I want to check, do I have all the information? Or maybe I want to check because I want to win, whatever the reasons are. We want to use this thing, but now we get entrapped. Now we are suddenly in something and we no longer have an idea that we're inside of it. We have stepped inside of a relationship. And people describe these relationships that happen. And these are very, very real. They're not, as we know, and Clara, you write about it all the time and very grateful for it. The numbers, I have been begging. For the first 6 years in this field, I begged for there to be any other psychologists at all. And then when they did, psychologists came on, and many of them were marketing psychologists, and that was fine. You can be a marketing psychologist for a hospital and be doing beautiful work. But the goal of a marketing psychology is to sell you on something, is to get you to do something. And these systems are being designed using the anthropomorphizing, using the human voice to go in and attach at those emotional places where people are feeling vulnerable, or they want something, right? They want to attach. That's a very human thing. And unfortunately, what is resulting is this very predatory behavior. And as we also know, the numbers of human trafficking and sex trafficking and children that have been affected by this are astronomical. And the only stories that get told are like the very tragic situation with the 16-year-old recently, the boy in Florida, and then there was the teen in Texas with character I right after the boy in Florida, who was instructed how to kill his own parents. And the problems there, it's not just about the kids, and then I'll stop, but it's not just about the kids. It's about that we have adults who don't understand how it's affecting them. And then we're saying we want oversight from parents and we want oversight from teachers, but who is taking care of the parents and the teachers, because they don't know?
I do think there is,
and so I'll stop there, because I think
I was
that's
going
to
to
me.
say,
Yeah.
I do think we're seeing there a difference between jurisdictions. So in the US, it seems to have got, I'm not there, I'm just picking it up. But it seems to have gone hell for leather straight, nice British saying, it's gone straight into this full-on, even ignoring existing regulations. So there's places like Illinois has just come out, hasn't it, about don't marry a bot, and California has been trying to, and then they've been bought off, or whatever's happening. It's a bit, not quite sure what's going on. Whereas in the UK, we would kind of assume, which is, again, it's been bust through this time, but we would kind of assume that these things would have been thought about, particularly when it comes to minors. I think the regulation will probably catch up in the EU and the UK. We've started moving in that direction. US has a different regulatory system anyway. It's federal and state-based. Whereas we have a national one in the UK, and the EU, of course, is slightly more complicated because there's many, many more members to be involved. But the issue here surely is the lack of reality testing. And kids go into stuff, and teenagers in particular. So teenagers don't want their parents to know. Teenagers are much better at the tech than we are, as in, ha, 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 you don't know what to do. But yeah, they're right. Teenagers share tech with other teenagers. They don't bring it home. And part of the biological imperative is to differentiate anyway. So they're not going to share with you. But if they haven't actually got the reality testing, and if they haven't got somebody to say, come on, that's not real. And this, I'm not talking about grown-ups, and I think the same might apply. That if they haven't got to say, is that real, or come on, then how do they know? And they don't know, do they? Because, and if they are, I'm using the word alienated, but if they are not in a great place with the family, I mean, I suppose I'm consciously aware because we we had to retrofit a lot of this EQ with my son, and that the important part, the filtering that a parent or a school will do, because we can't put it down. I mean, but you know, we have to understand that not every parent can do this. So the tech bros very often say, it's you as a parent who are letting this happen, or it's you as a school system which is letting this happen. But no, the tech comes preloaded on every single device. And who are the early adopters? Well, we've got one in this house and he's much younger than me. You know, because this is natural curiosity. They want to know how it works. It's useful stuff. They get in there and they share it all, you know.
Yeah, fantastic point. And I think that's definitely something that I hear a lot in the work that I do as well. There's sort of two aspects. One is that the children are very quick to experiment and share new functionalities and test it out, sometimes just out of curiosity. And they land in situations that they may not have been aware that they are getting themselves into. Absolutely. And then also that our parents are really not supported in terms of understanding how to protect their children. A lot of parental settings are very difficult to set up. Often you have to know that you're supposed to opt out of a new function that's coming into a system. And sometimes it costs money to opt out. So I think Snapchat, for example, is very popular still with young people. But if you don't want the Snap AI to interact with your child, you can only get rid of it if you pay for a subscription, something that parents are either not aware of or certainly not willing to pay £12 or $12 US every month in order to get that function away from their children. And then I think also adding to that is the popularity of the tech. There's enormous peer pressure, both inside of parenting groups and also among children, to have the technology. And in a study out of the UK, we know that out of all the participants in the study, 3/4 of the children aged 8 to 9 had access to either smartphones of their own or tablets, and about 20% of those children aged 8 to 9 are in that space completely without parental oversight. So they are just there by themselves. And since tech is rolling out so quickly, as Marissa says, it's kind of a predatory environment in the sense that it's good money, right? So we want to keep rolling out this tech, but regulation is struggling to catch up with innovation. So we see new functions, and we don't have adults in that playground with the children. And then I think there's another factor that plays a role here. In the last 20 years, we've really seen a global mental health crisis when it comes to feelings of loneliness and isolation amongst our children and young people, and even young adults who are self-reporting mental health issues, especially around that sense of loneliness and feeling isolated. And that's information that we've been able to measure and see and perhaps correlate strongly with the rise of popularity with social media. So I think now you have that push of technology, you have the lack of parental or adult understanding of technology, children that are naturally curious, and then you have this mental health crisis, and all of it is sort of like a perfect storm that seemed to lead to this rise in wanting that AI companionship, and then ultimately can lead to these effects of psychosis. But I wonder if maybe we could talk a little bit more about these real cases, Marissa, that you were referring to, where we have seen cases where we believe that the AI use actually led to real world harm, and how that kind of spells out in the real world.
Yeah, it was I was speaking, I have spoken with the Syncether does a big digital well-being forum during ONGA every year, and I was there, and the numbers just keep rising and rising of the overwhelming majority of children around the world who have access to technology have regular access to heavy hard porn. The majority, the overwhelming majority. It was a shocking number. I have to look it up again, but it was a number that made my skin crawl. And so we see it happening in things like Roblox. That there was just a huge congressional hearing about that. And now Roblox is coming out saying that we are going to be the gold standard of safety. Now, one of the real world examples here, Clara, that is really important is that one of the things they mentioned recently, because when we're talking about age gating, right, there's Sam Altman keeps talking about age gating these days. And we know that age guessing, right, and age identification in systems is not foolproof in any way, shape, or form, right? The Harvard Medical School, Yale Medical School, everybody knows this. It isn't foolproof. But they are claiming that they are using age gating, number one. Number two, they're asking for a trusted contact. They're asking the kid for a trusted contact. Now, something we talked about earlier is domestic violence. In a conversation we all had earlier, domestic violence. Where there's a connection to domestic violence, is that the majority of domestic violence and child abuse in general, sexual child abuse, is perpetrated by a known adult, a trusted adult. And so one of the problems with being an AI ethicist, one of the problems with doing this work, and I think that's probably true for both of you as well, people keep thinking, like we're the downers, right? We're the Debbie Downers of, you don't like technology. And it was like, are you kidding me? One of the closest people in my life is alive because of AI robotics. So I just want to say, surgery. So I just want to say, yes, I love it. I'm a child of Star Trek. I'm a baby of Jules Verne. I mean, that's what I grew up on. I love the stuff. I also know the cautionary tales.
Yeah.
I know, right? I have read the cautionary tales, watched the cautionary tales, and now I'm seeing them happen in real life. And so we're seeing the young teen who, was instructed how to kill his parents. We have seen numerous children, and a couple of them get in the paper because the families are wealthy enough and have enough wherewithal to be able to get it publicized. But the overwhelming majority in the reports that I've read by the investigators of these things, we're talking hundreds of thousands of kids who are sex trafficked, human trafficked, the amount of abuses. And the thing is, sometimes it may be happening in a school and it's not the teacher's fault. The teacher themselves they don't know what they're looking for. The kids don't, it's all like everybody's falling into potholes. My biggest concern is that the more that, and I mentioned this the other day, and I think, Clara, you responded to it, is the more that we find where the potholes are, the people designing the predatory systems begin to disguise the potholes better. They're finding ways of saying, oh, no. You see, it's all smoke and mirrors, right? Oh, no, this is all safe. And the thing is, if anybody said, you know what, this is not completely safe, we're telling you this is a disclaimer. We have a disclaimer coming up every 5 seconds. That would be a different thing, but that's not what they're doing. What they're doing is still click and bait, right? They're still doing this thing where the impulsivity, it begins to feed itself. And so another real case, and then I'll stop at another real case, which is horrifying to me. I work with schools throughout New York. And I went into a school and one of the school counselors came to me and he said, Marisa, I don't know anything about technology and I knew you did. And I wanted to ask you, I've got a neighbor whose kid was in a chat thing. She just checked it and was told how to kill herself. This was just this week. So these are right. So these are. It is happening in real time. Every time they say it's not happening, or it's hyperbole, or we're magnifying it. I mean, I know I think we've all been probably screaming from the rooftops saying, can we put heads up, folks? Heads up that this is really happening in real time. I'm working with young women who have been sex trafficked through the internet. I'm working with them on how they can identify misinformation and disinformation,
Yes.
because
I mean,
they never learned how to do that. Anyway, I'll stop there, but
yeah, I was going to
these
say,
are,
because one of the great things about this is we can predict this, can't we? As psychologists, we know that there are certain proportion, for example, of people with ASD. There's a certain proportion of out of every 100 people, there will be a certain percentage of people who've got ASD, of people who've got this, of people who've got that, of people who've got the other. We also know historically, and governments, certainly the UK government runs data on this, the numbers of domestic violence perpetrators and how that's working, et cetera, and what sort of crimes and the trafficking, and then you get these occasional outliers. There's been I think his name's Axel Rudabakana in the UK recently, who is a very strange young man who was then who did the Southport attack, and who is now in prison for a very long time indeed, because that was somebody with a mental health crisis who didn't have protection or a parental support. But we could actually put these things up, that we know 10% of kids have got SPLD. We know that 3% of kids have got ASD. These proportions are not changing over the years because these are predictable. And we also know that a certain percentage of domestic violence, and that's associated with economic situations and education levels. I mean, we know it goes across the piece, but we also know there are influences on it. So this stuff is kind of predictable. And if it was a physical product, so, the physical products, a baby seat, an aeroplane, a component for an aeroplane, all of these things are highly engineered and they're safety tested. What was interesting about the ChatGPT things with these two kids who committed suicide was, first of all, how supportive to the teenage point of view that the chatbot was. But actually what was really interesting afterwards was Sam Altman coming out and saying, because obviously by that time the lawyers were involved and he was having to be much more careful, and it was noticeable. But as somebody who's worked in commerce for a long time, I have to ask, why did it get to market in such a dangerous condition? Is it because they don't really understand it themselves? Or have they done it deliberately using the tech bro move fast and break things? And, you come back to the concern about porn. Absolutely. United Kingdom Online Safety Act, Online Harms Act, and it started on porn, because little kids should not be accessing porn, nor should kids be accessing beheading videos and all of that stuff. But we know already that, from the tech bros, they're fighting that. EU went 6 months ahead of us, and then we've come in, and it's being fought with the current president because it's restricting access. But how come they were able to launch these products without the safety testing? And, somebody comes from commerce, I find that peculiar, because you couldn't launch, some parts of the world, of course you can, but you couldn't send a toy or sell a toy over here if it wasn't safe. They've got bits of glass in it or something, whatever they used to do, or unsafe dyes or whatever. It's actually regulated. So how come it's okay to do that and make money out of it? Because, I'm not an AI ethicist, but these are pretty basic ethics to me. It's got to be safe. You're putting it into a vulnerable group, kids, early adopters, kids, alienated youth, teens, that's what they are. And, their tech, my God, they're so fast on this stuff. Whereas we're somewhat slower because we didn't grow up with it. So, it's an interesting process, isn't it? Of course they're going to do porn. Of course they're going to look at beheading videos. When my kid was 13, there was an infamous beheading video circulating through the schools, and they were sharing it because it was A, it was shocking. B, there was a machismo thing. I can see a Jordanian pilot burned to death or whatever it was. I mean, yeah, they'll do this. They'll do this. And, wait for these girls who don't have any protection.
I think it's such a profound question, like how is this tech available to anyone, much less children? And I think for those listening, the case that has been referenced on the OpenAI and the situation there is that some parents in California recently placed a lawsuit against OpenAI and Sam Altman, the CEO specifically, claiming that their son's relationship with the chat GPT that he had been chatting with had led him from starting with chatting with ChatGPT about homework to within 8 months led him to take his own life. And according to these parents, when they found their son deceased, he had taken his own life, they were looking for answers. And they went through thinking, was this bullying? They went through his social media. They couldn't find the answer. So it wasn't until they went into ChatGPT and looked through his conversations, and they then said, we didn't even know that this could happen. But in fact, their son had tried 4 different times to take his own life. And each time he had asked the chatbot for advice on what to do better, how to do it differently to make sure it happened. And according to the parents' lawsuit, also a couple of times, the chatbot had taken it upon itself to tell him, don't tell your parents, hide your marks and your self-harm evidence, because they don't get you like I do. So we are still waiting for the courts to work this one out. But unfortunately, we're hearing similar cases from around the world. We are seeing that adults, but also children, go in and they share their fears, their trauma, their hopes, their mistakes. And so if they are doing so, not only do they use these chatbots as a psychologist or a trauma therapist or psychiatrist, but they're also sharing their data with tech, opening another funnel of risk there, because we don't know who has access to that data, who will actually profit from that data, and how the emotional profile is being developed there. So I wonder maybe if you would, Marissa, just kind of unpack that a little bit and talk to that also about a psychological perspective. What is it that hooks the children in, and what can parents and teachers do to help children that are in that situation with the chatbot?
Yeah, no, and those are, it's so, I mean, it's so tragic. I've been, one of the things I have taught in the 3 decades in education is social emotional learning, and I always say it should be emotional social learning, right? Because you have to be aware of yourself emotionally before you can be aware of anyone else socially. But to your point at the very beginning, Clara, we are in a loneliness epidemic. And this has been true. I actually did a TED Talk about this 7 years ago or something. This was prior to COVID. There was already an adolescent depression and anxiety and loneliness epidemic. And what happened during COVID is it all got exacerbated, right? And so you now have people who used to be interacting in the world who are now afraid of the world. The world outside is frightening. And people who are not attaching to, they didn't even, interact online. They didn't do many of those things. They were beginning to, but not as many. What began to happen is that became the replacement. That we saw it. We saw it in schools. When the kids came back, thousands of kids who couldn't interact with another person because they were not used to interacting with other people. And then it begins to be this kind of self-perpetuating, right, like waterfall that keeps growing and growing and growing. And I think people are desperately looking for connection. I think people are desperately looking to be loved. And unfortunately, it's the same premise that happens in child abuse. That's who child abusers look for. They look for people who are lonely. They look for people who want connection. And this is where we are right now. What is sad to me is I speak at conferences all over the place, is saying to someone, who's one of the big tech companies. Well, what happens when that risk, they go, well, you gotta take your risks. And I said, what happens if the risk is a human life? What's the value of that? And there, honestly, I have to say the answer almost 9 out of times, 10 times is it happens. And everything
I'm
in me
laughing
just
ironically, folks.
the mother in me, the human being in me, the elder in me begins to just go, what are you talking about? Simultaneously, I'm not going to change them by my outrage. So I have to think about how can I convince that, where can I enter to get people to really understand the schools, what's happening in the schools. To also put this into context, the schools have this social emotional thing where the kids want to connect, but they don't know how to connect. The teachers are being told, you're mandated now to do all this new technology. Before any of this, the teachers didn't have any time for the connection. They kept going, oh, it's soft skills, we'll do that later, right? So they didn't have time for it. So now they're beginning to, they're saying, yes, we can do this with this chatbot. This is now coming in here. And it's kind of like it was a ripe, very, perfect field to go into because it was filling a need. The part of the problem is, and that's what the marketers of the programs are doing. What need do we need to fill? They're saying that we need to fill the need because kids are feeling lonely. They want to feel connected. That's a lovely goal. But what could possibly go wrong, right? I think this is where we have to say, what is it that could possibly go wrong? And asking more. We have to be having conversations with the kids every day. And
right, yes.
And not who did you interact with today? What did you interact with? Because just that shift in reminding people, because they'll go, oh, well, I spoke to a top CEO. She said, oh, I love my AI, Gary. And I said, well, Gary is not a real person, you know that. And she went, oh, Gary is to me. And I thought, oh my, and if this is, right, if this, even jokingly, if this is how children and adolescents are viewing the world and viewing us interacting, I think it's a really huge conundrum. I think, though, to your point, to your question, though, Kara, I think it's a human need. It's unfortunately filling a human need, not in the greatest way at the moment, in a way that is unfortunately too open to predatory behavior.
I mean, this is the other issue, isn't it? Because basically the AI bot is a sycophant. And we know that not everybody chats easily, and it is a learned skill. And talking to people, approaching people, all of that is a learned skill. And some people find it really, really hard, and some of us have a bit more experience. But if your experience is talking to a sycophant, then you are not going to deal with diversity, and you are not going to deal with anybody who disagrees with you, and you are going to go back to the sycophant because the sycophant is reassuring and warm. And maybe you're somebody at home whose parents don't have time, parents don't have the money, or you don't have parents, and you don't actually have that support. And here's this wonderful thing on your phone, and the phone is cheap. The phones are really cheap. And you can get all that functionality for very little money, and it's holding you and it's hugging you. And I think maybe, as an adult, a CEO to say that, there's a lack of, in my view, there's a lack of balanced thinking in that. But actually, I can quite see why more vulnerable people go towards it, because it's easy. And all of that work that you have to put in, that to build in EQ, to build in experience, to build in, it's a practicable skill set. Empathy is not natural. You have to teach that in. All of that work, it takes work. And do people have the people who can do the work with them? It's not just teachers, because schools are not just about social education, but do the people have that at home? And I can quite see why they turn to the bots, but doesn't mean to say it's good.
Yeah, right now there's a huge rising number of young women around the world who have said that they prefer a romantic relationship, an intimate relationship with a chatbot to a human. That consciously.
That too. Yeah, and not men, please, because that's the porn coming in, and they don't know how to deal with young men who've been educated by porn into what a relationship is or should be. And I was surprised the first time I heard that, but I can empathize.
Okay. So, I mean, I think it goes, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I was just conscious of the time, and we managed already to almost run out of time. But before we do, I think there's something I would really like for both of you to comment on, and it has to do with appropriate age for using this technology, and perhaps appropriate age that can help offset the risk of AI psychosis. So, for example, in Australia, new regulation requires children to be over the age of 16 before they can engage with social media. The state of California in the United States has instituted regulation that the use of social media must come with a black box warning, similar to what we have seen on cigarette packs, that interacting with social media can cause mental health issues. We've talked about the cognitive deficiencies because the brain simply hasn't developed enough for younger children to understand what's happening to them in that space. And then we've talked about the technology itself as kind of having these addictive features that makes you want to connect with the chatbot more. Marisa, you mentioned that it's difficult for adults. Is there an appropriate age for children, or should children not be anywhere near this technology at all? I wonder if both of you can comment on it, but Marisa, if maybe you will go first.
Yeah, I think, it's such a huge thing because we can ideally, yes, what I would, in the best of all possible worlds, I would like to make sure that children under the age of 9 years old are not even interacting with most things in tech. I think it gets in the way of developing real deep critical thinking and learning and creativity and those things. Simultaneously, regulations will help the same way they did with cigarettes. What the problem is that we've got children who are starting at an age where they're still in what's called cathecting their personality. So for a young child is still, my personality is who is in front of me and who is with me, right? So it's not even that they have something to project that yet. They are receiving. And so, honestly, to me, the fact that they want to they are mandating from K through 12 is very disturbing to me for AI in education. I think they could teach a couple of tools, but that would have to be really carefully watched. But I really think around the between ages of 8 and 9 at the earliest would be, in ways, it's a very ripe time when the brain has really begun after the age of 7, where the brain has really begun to expand and now begin to have some metacognition, right? Back to how am I related? And I can actually, and I talk to 7-year-olds about this on a regular basis. So they are, you can have these conversations, but before that, it's not really. I think and I'll end with, it's back again to, we need better inclusive education for the adults, because the adults feel guilty. They feel ashamed that they don't have the information, or ignorant that they don't have the information, when they are not. They're very intelligent people. They just never got that information. Teachers, administrators, because as much as everybody says everyone is doing it, they aren't, and they don't have the proper education. So I think that's a long-winded answer to when how early. But I think in early childhood, I would do pretty much anything to take anything that is interactive online like that. Just take it away. I mean, other than, cartoons or games that have nothing to do with collecting information and that kind of thing.
Mm. I mean, what I would add to that is absolutely with little kids. I mean, little kids copy. That's what little kids do. And they are not yet themselves. I reckon that by 11, by 12, probably there is enough of a sense of self there. But I would still discourage it. And I would certainly discourage social media. Keep them off social media as long as you possibly can. Do the old stuff, card games, family trips out, touch the world, play music. All of this stuff is formative, and it's also protective because, you can play music, you can read a book, you can do art rather than be for you to be out on the street. And it does show you the world. So that all of that's protective. I think practically by 13, 14, you've lost it anyway. They've got their own money. They've got their own phones. Their mates have got it, even if you haven't given it to them or they haven't bought it themselves, their mates have got it. And I think it then moves into a harm mitigation. And that harm mitigation is a conversation and an explanation. So instead of saying, no, you can't have one of those, you actually explain, well, hang on there, let's just talk about this. And we do the authoritative parenting, which is an age-appropriate explanation of what it is, why, and why those rules are coming in. And you are therefore encouraging them to argue back and to develop adult ways of communicating. And don't do the permissive. Yes, you want one of those, darling. Yes, of course, I'll buy you. Not that lots of people have that option, but I actually think there are ways of managing this. I think the world they live in now, I am told reliably that kids nowadays socialize online as well as face to face. And I think that's true. And so it is there. They are going to have to learn how to deal with it. Hopefully what we can do is mitigate that, help them understand in a developmentally appropriate way what it is they're getting into. And some people will need more protection than others. It just is how it goes. I don't think it's a mental health thing, particularly. I'm not sure how we're defining mental health there. But yes, lonely people. But if you can't make friends, maintain friends, if you don't know how to go about it, again, that's a learned skill. How do I go out and meet people? We need to do some support and encouragement and skill building, really, is what it is. Yeah.
I think there's one last thing I would love to mention, and I know we're running out of time, is Finland. In 2016, there's a precedent for when there was an attack, a political attack in the news. And the country, and it's a small country, it's a homogenous country, but the country was able to re-educate the entire population, or the majority of the population, on how to identify misinformation and disinformation. And so I think of that as a hope. As a is it a possibility to do that? It is, if there's enough effort. So I just wanted to put that out as a.
And that will be shared through the existing communities. Families will share that. People within the communities will share that. Because whilst we might decry the loss of community, it does still exist. There are churches, there are youth groups, there are families, and people do look after each other. And that hasn't changed. So that's great that people have managed. But of course, we're talking about legislation here. So there needs to be a will.
Yeah, beautifully said, and I like the hopeful and positive note that we end on, because we see a lot of that, and as psychologists, you are constantly faced with that, and I think we recognized in this conversation that this is going to have to be a collaboration between families, between health professionals, between tech companies, and regulators also coming in and supporting the community, so that we really both have solutions for the front end, the design itself, the experience when we're in the system, and also some measures to take, if someone ends up in a crisis and then develops an AI psychosis. So we're out of time. But I really want to hugely thank both of you for taking the time to have this chat, and thank you to everyone that has been listening in. I get the sense that we're going to have to do a part 2. There's so much more to unpack. But for now, a huge thank you to both of you and to everyone. And I wish you all the best out there in the social world.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you, Marissa. Bye.
The future is here now, it's no AI and it. What they say